Well, it feels like you're actually going somewhere. It's like a lot of games they can seem like you're kind of just falling through the game,
Mm-hmm.
which I mean it means that they're accessible, which in some sense is admirable. But at a certain point, you get tired of that and you want to just experience like something that can bring out that part of you that wants to like have an uphill battle,
Yeah.
and like really feel like you're being challenged and you're rehearsing things and you're considering things.
Yeah, rather than feeling on rails, you
Yeah.
want to actually sort of carve your way through
Mm-hmm.
and get the accomplishment of having built something, having built yourself in this case,
Mm-hmm.
this game, actually getting better and better, and feeling like the game is not treating you like a child,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I mean that in the most like basic sense, like it doesn't treat you like you're smarter than you are.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make you feel stronger than you actually are. You actually have to earn it.
Yeah, the whole like Souls series seems like it has taken its place as like the most, if not the truest, but at least the most satisfying form of RPG right now.
Yeah, because it's not just built on, okay, we're giving you these stats which are markedly improving the ease at which you flow through the world, but it's rather, okay, we're giving you these stats that are really minor improvement, like they're minor little tiny bumps
Mm-hmm.
in your skills, but really it's you who are the one who's actually like improving
Yeah.
substantially, and everything feels immediate. The combat, it's all based on, you need to dodge, you need to time it just right.
Right. That is a nice detail though that has been, I'm pretty sure, this way since the very beginning, which is that as soon as you hit the dodge button, in that moment you're invincible. So it rewards you for that exact timing.
Mm-hmm.
And that informed my playstyle throughout this one, because the first Dark Souls seemed like a very slow game to me because I used my shield a lot. I was a lot more cautious. I just had it up, ready to block any attack, and that was very fun too. But and this game, it's just a testament to like how this game will adapt to your playstyle and really like will inform an entirely different new way of playing just by that one simple change of not using a shield. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's quite impressive actually how refined the moment-to-moment gameplay can feel, and then when you consider the fact that you're doing only one possible version of that combat,
Mhm.
right? Because I played it with the shield
Mhm.
the whole time, so I had my shield and my sword and maybe an axe or sometimes, and so for me it was a waiting game, right? You're there and you're managing your stamina, you're getting hit and sort of like having to consider when to come back but not coming back too soon, so it's like you're waiting back and forth, and it's like that back and forth type of game. But for you, because you didn't use your shield, yours was much more active and aggressive, and both of those function extremely well and are extremely exciting, fun experiences.
Mhm.
And that's incredible as far as game design, to have such range and yet have them both function as if the whole game was designed around that, right?
If you were to compare this game to like the many sort of copycats, or to name a specific copycat, what was that game called?
Uh, yeah, Lords of the Fallen.
Right, Lords of the Fallen is a sort of Dark Souls copycat that actually manages to completely, like, wholesale get all of the same movesets, all of the same controls, all of the same basic gameplay into the game. But just the fact that it isn't as carefully considered as this game shines through.
Yeah, isn't that's such a funny example, because it seems like it should be exactly like Dark Souls.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it has all the same types of bars to pay attention to. Your health bar functions similarly. You have to refill with a little flask type thing, and like you have a souls type element of collecting souls from enemies, and then you can lose all of them if you die,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you don't get to collect them back, and you have to deal with stamina. It has all the exact same things,
Mm-hmm.
but the spirit feels completely different.
Yeah.
And some of that, I would say that some of that has to do with the world itself. Because I do think Dark Souls 3, as soon as you start it, the look of the world feels so macabre and twisted,
Mm-hmm.
nightmarish, I would say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that sucks you in a way that I don't think something like Lords of the Fallen, which is oddly generic,
Mm-hmm.
like generic / Diablo generic, like
Right.
that.
Right.
And this one, Dark Souls 3, is rather much more just twisted, and it feels personal and twisted.
Yeah. Well, it's like there are little details that honestly are hard to notice if you don't look for them, but they're like for example, if you go to if you notice, like if you look at a boss area, like the ground is crumbled underneath like the place where the boss dwells, to indicate that they've been like fighting off adventurers constantly, like things like that. There will be like an overturned caravan, and like that is the kind of detail that I really just think of as flavor detail in any other game. But I kind of covet the people who can look at that and actually glean some kind of story from it, because I know it's there. I know that all these details mean something.
Yeah, like when you go to Undead Settlement in Dark Souls 3 and you start seeing the bodies hanging, and they're wound like in these little sarcophagi type materials, and they're just hanging on the ceiling, and you have all these religious practitioners, which touches on what we were saying earlier about the lack of like this on rails feeling, right?
Right. This is entirely my own shortcoming, but I don't even fully understand what the main story of the game is, like what the main quest is. I know what I did, but I don't know why I did it. But like everything about like the item descriptions to the little strange cryptic like whispers of the NPCs, it's like this Kubrickian puzzle throughout the whole game that like I really if it doesn't give me the story, it at least gives me a sense of place, and that's what I want in a game like this. You know, I want to feel like, unlike Lords of the Fallen or so many other games, I want to feel like I'm not just going through a level, I'm not just going through a stage, I'm going through a place.
And that is really valuable, especially in sucking you into a world, because it makes the world feel lived in, not lived for you, but lived totally in disregard of you.
Right. Yeah. It's like it's just this separate thing. It's not. It is so delicate the way that the story is told that you can actually ignore it. In a weird way, it almost rewards a sense that some people probably have, which is that the story doesn't matter, which is a kind of a valid thing too. Like if you're just playing a game that is brilliantly designed and extremely satisfying and extremely fast paced, there's an argument to be made that the story isn't the main thing there, and even those people get rewarded because the story doesn't get in your way, you know. So it rewards that exploration as well as a lack of curiosity.
Well, you could say that the narrative is what doesn't matter, but what does shine through, whether you ignore it or not, is atmosphere. Right? Like even though I don't 100% follow every piece of history with these lords and sort of what happened in this fire-linked world, the sense of dread and the sense of sorrow and like the feeling of like something apocalyptic is going on, and it's so dreadful and dreary and dark and lonely, that rings through, completely removed from whether you follow a strict narrative or not. I think that's what makes it really powerful, and specifically like for a game, right?
And that is something that is also assisted greatly by the amazing art throughout the game. It's not a clean looking game. It's not like Mirror's Edge or something. It is, however, like extremely detailed and beautiful. It has like these incredible vistas. It looks like no other game does, because I think it captures that balance between quote unquote graphics or graphical fidelity, and which is that thing of like, how many polygons does it have. It finds that balance between that stuff and just pure art.
It doesn't fall into the trap of being white noise, because it gives you a crap ton of information, right? Like you were just saying, there's so much detail all over the place, and yet somehow as a player it feels like I'm still guided through the world in a very clear way. And like, for example, I could be winding through an environment that should be totally confusing, right? Like if you're in a forest environment, it should be extremely easy to get lost. And yet there's enough subtle variation in that environment that it feels almost as if it was like plain as day, like, oh, this is the red spot, this is the white spot, this is the brown spot, this is the green spot. And it's like in my head I can visualize, oh, I'm here now without needing any map, without needing any kind of objective marker, which is usually typical of these open world type games. And it accomplishes that while not flattening the world, while
Right.
not making the world too simplistic.
It almost makes it look, and I cannot believe that this is true, but it makes it look like the first thing they did was design all the clutter. It makes it look like that was the main thing that they focused on first, and then everything else came after, because that stuff is so rich.
I think that connects to why this game is so addictive,
Mhm.
right? Because when I was playing it before, for like a whole week, literally would wake up and just play Dark Souls.
Mhm.
And I think some of that is because the world feels so real and it feels so organic. It truly feels like you've gotten sucked into a world, like you're completely in the game,
Mhm.
and it feels like if you put enough effort, there's discovery around every corner. It's not going to repeat. You don't feel like, oh, it's going to get repetitive now. I'm just going to be doing the same couple of corridors over and over. You're constantly feeling just like you're really invested in something, and it's really paying off. My girlfriend, she was saying that Dark Souls feels like what Zelda could have been if Zelda grew up with you.
Mhm.
Because one of the issues with Zelda games, unfortunately, although of course we love Zelda games, and it was like Ocarina of Time is one of my favorite games of all time, but unfortunately the Zelda games have sort of stayed the same. But what made Zelda so fascinating was how much it sucked you into its world, and you really felt like it was a living, breathing world at the time.
Mhm.
But as you grow up, a lot of those things can start to feel artificial.
Mhm.
And Dark Souls 3 removes a lot of that artificiality by actually growing up with you and making sure that the world is consistent enough for an adult to be able to follow
Mhm.
and for an adult to be able to really get sucked into.
Right.
One thing that we should talk about, if we're going to talk about the world for a bit, is maybe talk about the connections between Dark Souls 3 and the original Dark Souls. Because this is a big chunk of the game is actually a direct homage to the first game. And pointedly not the second game, which is kind of interesting. Because the second game was, a different creative director was behind that. The creative director for Dark Souls 1 and 3 is the same one who did Bloodborne. And you can feel it because as soon as 3 starts, it opens in a very similar way to Dark Souls 1. With the undead settlement, it's like similar to an undead burg, and it looks very similar. Like it looks like the same type of world. And there's other locations you go to, without spoiling it for people, where it definitely is directly tied to the first game. And so it seems like the game feeds on that nostalgia without falling prey to some of the laziness that nostalgia can bring in. Because it has all the same stuff, right? It has the same organization of the world, but it's using that not to comfort you too much, but rather to surprise you. So it's like playing with your expectations. And so in that sense, it's using the nostalgia part in a really productive manner.
There's, really, just if you enumerate it, there's a ton of little nostalgic elements of this game, but there's so much of everything else. There's so much newness. There's so much invention that the nostalgia doesn't get in the way of that.
I actually found the game a lot easier. At least it felt easier. Of course, there was plenty of moments where I was challenged quite a bit, and I died, enough times. But later on in the game, after I had already started leveling up some of the weapons a bit more, I started to figure out ways in which the different move sets that you can add onto these weapons can actually be helpful. Like the way in which it breaks people's block, or it will give you a buff to your attack or whatever. And so it's adding a lot of variety in it, and it's really letting you choose even more so the kind of play style that you want to have. And so maybe the game feels easier just because I feel like I have so many more options that I'm actually able to take advantage of.
Right. The bosses had a lot of. I thought that they were really good this time.
I think visually they're stunning to look at. I think of the Boreal Dancer, right? The blue one who's sort of wiggling through as you're trying to fight them. Or there's that boss way later of the two princes, the brothers, and one of them hangs on the back of one of them.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of that has to do with just the graphics, right? They now have all this room to make the bosses bigger and crazier and animate more.
Yeah, especially the Boreal Dancer and the princes and just some of the flame-based enemies they look so they look so special. They look so Dark Souls, and something about the fire in this game specifically, like really ties into how like magical fire is, like narratively.
Yeah.
You know, it looks like fire, but not too much like fire. It looks like magic.
Overall, Dark Souls 3 felt familiar, right? But refined to the point of being memorable and really honestly like one of the best in the series. I loved the crap out of this one.
Yeah, it's amazing. I couldn't recommend it more highly. It's the only game I can think of that can put Dark Souls 1 to shame.
So overall, you know, it's a fantastic experience, and they would look forward to see what they do next. Anyway, thanks for listening.
Thank you.
See you around.